"You can't fish here anymore." That voice hit me before I even turned around. Standing at the edge of my dock was Karen, head of the Pine Creek HOA. Early 40s, sharp features, red coat that screamed authority, and sunglasses that hid the look in her eyes, but not the attitude. She wasn't just enforcing rules, she was performing. "I'm Evan Cole, 35, born and raised on this lake. My father built this cabin with his hands, and I spent half my childhood pulling trout from these waters. I came back to this place for peace, not politics. But peace didn't last long." Karen's heels clicked against the old planks of the dock as she folded her arms. "Fishing's been suspended," she said flatly. "Algae bloom. Your policy." Behind her, the lake shimmered strangely, too slick, too dark. A foul smell drifted across the breeze. Then I saw them. 3 dead trout floating near the shore, their silver bellies catching the sunlight like shards of glass. "What did you do to my lake?" I asked. She smiled faintly, adjusting her sunglasses. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Mr. Cole." After she left, I noticed a black hose trailing from her backyard down into the water, disappearing beneath the surface. She said it was just algae, but the next morning I realized something far worse was feeding that lake. The next morning, Karen was already waiting for me. Same red coat, same sunglasses, same clipboard tucked under her arm like a sword. She didn't even flinch when I walked down to the dock. "I told you yesterday," she said sharply. "Fishing here is prohibited until further notice." "Prohibited?" I scoffed. "My family's owned this stretch of shoreline for 50 years. You don't get to tell me when I can touch my own water?" She sighed, glancing at her paperwork like I was a line item on her to-do list. "It's not about ownership, Mr. Cole, it's about compliance. The lake's condition reflects on the entire community. Your activities are drawing attention." "Attention?" I pointed toward the shore. "You mean the smell? The dead fish?" "That's not me, Melissa. That's whatever you're pumping into it." Her posture stiffened. I'd watched those accusations. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You've got a hose running straight from your property into the lake. I saw it." She hesitated for just a second. Long enough for me to know I'd hit something real. Then the mask snapped back on. "You're mistaken. I'd advise you to stop snooping around things that don't concern you." She turned on her heel and walked off, her reflection breaking apart on the poisoned water. She thought I'd back down. But when I followed that hose later that night, I found out exactly what she was hiding. That night, the moon sat low over Pine Creek, thin clouds sliding across it like smoke. I waited until the last porch light in the neighborhood blinked out before stepping outside. The air was cool and sharp, carrying that same chemical sting from the lake. I followed the slope behind Melissa's house, boots sinking softly into the damp soil. The sound of running water guided me, a faint trickle where no stream should have been. Then I saw it, a thick black hose snaking through the reeds, glistening under the moonlight. It ran straight from behind her privacy fence down toward the lake's inlet. I crouched beside it, pressing my hand to the surface. Warm. Not water. Something else. I traced it up the hill until I reached the fence. There, through a small gap, I saw a metal drum marked with yellow hazard symbols, algae control concentrate. But the label didn't list a company name, just a barcode and a faint skull icon worn by the weather. I snapped a few pictures with my phone, my hands shaking. When I turned to leave, a twig cracked behind me. I froze. Someone was watching from the tree line, a shadow, standing perfectly still. I thought I'd caught her secret that night. But that shadow in the woods, it proved I wasn't the only one keeping an eye on the lake. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak outside made me sit up. That shadow near the woods, whoever it was, didn't move like an animal. It watched me leave, then melted back into the trees. By sunrise, I decided to go down to the docks again. The lake looked worse. A greenish film coated the surface, bubbling faintly near the inlet. The smell was stronger, chemical and sour like paint thinner and death. As I knelt to snap another photo, a voice behind me said, "You should stop." I spun around. It was Ray, the old groundskeeper. 60-something, stooped shoulders, cap pulled low. He'd worked this property since before the HOA ever existed. "Stop what?" I asked. He looked over both shoulders before stepping closer. asking questions. They don't like it when people start poking around the lake. What are they doing, Ray? He hesitated, chewing on the edge of his words. They've been pumping runoff into that water for months. Waste, pesticides, maybe worse. But the board said it's maintenance. I told you enough already. Then he turned and walked away fast, glancing back once, like he was scared to be seen talking to me. The wind picked up, rippling the water with streaks of green foam. If the groundskeeper was afraid to talk, I knew I was digging into something bigger than algae, and a lot more dangerous. 2 mornings later, I woke to the sound of engines. When I stepped onto the porch, 3 trucks with HOA maintenance decals were already parked by the shore. Men in orange vests unloaded drums marked algae treatment solution. Karen stood beside them, clipboard in one hand, her signature red coat bright against the gray clouds. "What's going on?" I called out. She didn't look up. "Routine cleanup, Mr. Cole. The HOA board approved additional treatment." For everyone's safety, I walked closer. "Funny, because that's the same chemical I saw leaking from your yard." Her jaw tightened behind the sunglasses. "You're mistaken. And if you keep trespassing on HOA business, I'll have you fined." The men began unrolling hoses, pumping more of that cloudy liquid into the lake. The smell hit hard, sour, metallic, wrong. I noticed Karen's red notebook tucked under her arm. When she flipped it open, I glimpsed pages full of inspection reports, all signed retroactively. Dates didn't match. I grabbed my phone and started recording. She froze, then forced a smile. "You're crossing a line, Evan." "Maybe," I said. "But at least I'm not poisoning a community." She turned away fast, whispering something to one of the workers. Within minutes, they packed up and left, leaving the water frothing white. They thought they could hide the truth under a layer of foam, but the lake wasn't done revealing its secrets. By afternoon, I had 4 bottles of lake water sealed and labeled. I drove an hour down to Dr. Hale, an independent environmental scientist my dad once worked with. His lab sat at the edge of town, small, cluttered, filled with jars of murky samples from a dozen different creeks. He poured a bit of my lake water into a beaker, sniffed it, and frowned. "That's not algae, Evan, that's chemical runoff." "What kind?" I asked. He ran a quick test. The liquid turned from clear to brown, then almost black. This is loaded with atrazine, nitrates, and something else. Industrial-grade biocide. Stuff banned years ago. Could that make people sick? Dr. Hale looked up, eyes narrowing. It could do worse. This could contaminate any connected water system. You said this lake feeds into a community line? Yeah, the HOA's reservoir. He swore under his breath. Then they're drinking it. He handed me the printed results. You didn't hear this from me, but whatever's in that lake isn't just illegal, it's criminal. Someone's cutting corners for money. I left the lab with the report clutched in my hand. My reflection in the glass door looked different, angrier, determined. Karen thought poisoning my lake would shut me down. She didn't know it was about to blow her entire neighborhood wide open. The next morning, my mailbox was stuffed full, 10 new envelopes, stamped HOA violation notice. One for unauthorized water testing, another for defamation, the rest. Random nonsense, grass height, noise complaints, even unapproved fishing structure, whatever that meant. Karen wasn't subtle anymore. She was angry. As I tore open the letters, a black SUV slowed in front of my cabin, tinted windows, no plates. It stopped just long enough for someone inside to snap a picture, then rolled away. By sunset, someone had keyed my truck. Deep, jagged scratches across the driver's door. And when I checked my security camera, the footage was gone. The files had been deleted. That night, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. A text, "Stop digging or you'll regret it." I stared at it for a long minute, heart pounding. I wanted to believe it was a prank. But when I looked outside, there was a single envelope pinned to my porch post. Inside, a printed photo of me at the dock taken that morning. Karen was getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. I opened my laptop and started uploading Dr. Hale's report to a private cloud. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd play smart. They thought fear would silence me. But the lake had already started whispering their secrets to the world, and I was ready to make it scream. By dawn, I'd made my decision. No more hiding. I sat at my desk, uploaded every file I had. The videos, the water test report, the photos of the hose and drums, even the screenshot of Karen's falsified inspection log. Then I wrote a caption. They poisoned my father's lake, and they're drinking the same water. Within hours, it spread like wildfire through local Facebook groups and community pages. Comments poured in. People from the HOA posted photos of their tap water turning cloudy, pets getting sick, and kids breaking out in rashes. Karen called me that afternoon. "You made a huge mistake, Evan," she hissed. "You don't understand what you've done." "Oh, I think I do," I said. I told the truth. By evening, local news vans were parked outside the neighborhood gate. The story had hit Channel 9. Pine Creek HOA accused of polluting lake. Residents at risk. I watched from my porch as Karen's white SUV sped past toward the HOA office, her red coat flashing like a warning light in the storm clouds gathering above. Somewhere deep inside, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She thought she could control the story, but the lake had other plans. And the real storm hadn't even started yet. 2 days after the leak, the storm hit hard. Rain hammered the valley, turning the hills into rivers of mud. My lake swelled, the waterline rising faster than I'd ever seen. By midnight, it overflowed into the creek that ran straight toward Pine Creek's reservoir, the one that supplied water to every single house in Karen's neighborhood. By morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. First came the HOA group posts. "Why is my tap water yellow?" Then came the local alerts. "Do not drink the water. Boil advisory in effect." And then, silence. Karen didn't show up at the office. The HOA's social pages went dark. Rumors spread. People getting sick, pets vomiting, and an elderly couple hospitalized. I stood by the lake watching the current carry bits of foam downstream. It felt like justice, but it didn't feel good. By noon, county officials had barricaded the main road. Hazmat suits, testing vans, news crews everywhere. I saw one officer holding up a jug of the contaminated water. The label on the side read, "Pine Creek Municipal Supply," Karen's own system. Her own poison. She'd tried to control the lake, but the lake controlled her fate instead. They thought they could hide behind power and paperwork. But nature doesn't sign contracts, and karma doesn't need permission. By the next morning, Pine Creek looked like a crime scene. Yellow tape lined the neighborhood entrance. Police cruisers, county health trucks, and environmental officers swarmed the streets. Reporters shouted questions at anyone wearing an HOA badge. I stood at a distance near my cabin, watching through binoculars as investigators followed the creek upstream. Within an hour, they found it. The buried hoses, the hidden barrels, and the pipe feeding straight into the lake inlet behind Karen's property. I saw her then, red coat soaked from the rain, arms crossed, arguing with the county inspector. She pointed toward my cabin, shouting something I couldn't hear. The inspector didn't even turn his head. He was holding her red notebook, the one filled with falsified inspection reports. Later that afternoon, 2 officers led Karen to a black SUV. She didn't fight it. Just kept muttering under her breath. The same phrase over and over. It wasn't supposed to go that far. The footage hit the evening news before sunset. Her face splashed across every screen. For the first time in months, the air around the lake felt lighter. But something in me couldn't celebrate yet. Because when water runs that deep, the damage doesn't end overnight. Karen was gone, but the poison wasn't. And the lake still had one last secret left to show me. The county issued its report within a week. Deliberate environmental negligence. The words looked cold on paper, but I knew what they really meant. Greed, lies, and months of slow poison. Karen and 2 other HOA board members were charged with felony dumping, falsifying records, and obstruction of a state investigation. Every homeowner who'd trusted them was furious. Not just about the water, but about the betrayal. The Pine Creek HOA collapsed overnight. Signs came down. Emails stopped. The same neighbors who once glared at me from their driveways now left baskets of food on my porch, notes that said, "Thank you," and "We're sorry." One night, I walked down to the dock. The water was still murky, but it had started to move again, little ripples catching the moonlight. For the first time since this all began, I could almost hear my father's voice in the wind. Truth always finds its way to the surface, and maybe he was right. Maybe the lake wasn't just healing, maybe it was cleansing. Still, when I saw a dark ripple near the inlet, something told me the story wasn't quite finished yet. Justice had been served, but the lake wasn't done speaking. And what it had left to say would change everything I thought I knew. Spring came early that year. The snow melted faster, feeding the streams that wound down through the valley and into the lake. I walked the shoreline one morning and almost didn't recognize it. The stench was gone, replaced by the smell of wet earth and pine. The water had cleared just enough to see the stones beneath the surface again. A few minnows darted through the shallows, tiny flashes of life where everything had once died. The county had hired a restoration crew. They worked quietly, planting reeds, adding oxygenators, and testing the pH levels every week. I offered to help, but mostly I just watched. The lake didn't need me to fix it. It needed time. Then one afternoon, while cleaning the dock, I found something wedged under a plank, a red notebook, swollen from the rain. Karen's. The pages had bled together, ink running down like tears. But one line was still clear. The lake feeds everything. If we control the lake, we control them. She wasn't wrong. She just never understood that control and destruction are the same thing when it comes to nature. I threw the notebook into the fire that night and watched. The flames turned red against the dark water. The lake was healing. But as it did, it left me one final lesson and one last promise I had to keep. It's been 6 months since the last test came back clean. The water sparkles again now, stiller, calmer, like it's finally breathing on its own. Some mornings I sit on the edge of the dock with a cup of coffee, watching the fog lift off the surface. The fish have come back. Herons land near the reeds again. The silence isn't heavy anymore. It's peaceful. I keep a small wooden box beside me, filled with my father's old lures. Sometimes I drop one into the water and smile. It's my quiet way of saying, "We made it, Dad. People still ask if I'd ever sell this place." I tell them no, not for any price. This isn't just property, it's proof. Proof that truth doesn't sink. It rises. Every time Karen tried to control the lake, she poisoned it thinking it would silence me. But the lake did what it always does, it spoke. It told the truth, louder than any of us could. So, if someone ever tries to take your peace, your home, or your truth, don't back down. Because no matter how deep they try to bury it, the truth always floats back to the surface. If this story hit you hard, if you've ever faced something you knew was wrong, hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe. Because some stories don't just need to be told, they need to be heard.